Hello, everybody. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, just so you guys can all be my mic check. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So welcome to today's Botanical Watercolor class. I am coming to you from rainy Berlin, Germany. Feels like summer is over already. I hope it warms up again. So my name is Mira, and I am the Botanical Watercolor Instructor for Berlin Drawing Room, and I'm actually also the founder of Berlin Drawing Room. So if you have any general questions and you fill out the contact form, I might be the one responding to you there as well. But in any case, some people are already doing this, and it would be really awesome if you can introduce yourself in the chat, say where you're joining from, your name, and yeah, anything else you want to share. That would be really great. So today we are going to be painting this very colorful firewheel flower. And I'm going to be taking you through that process. I'll put the link into the chat. This is also in the email you received, but just in case this makes it easier, I've just added it into the chat here. There is a link that has the reference photo that I'll be painting from, as well as an outline drawing that you're welcome to trace or to help you get started. I'm going to be giving a few tips on the drawing, but kind of for logistical reasons, I won't be demonstrating the entire drawing process live. I'll go into why a little bit later. So you should be all set with everything you need to get started there. For this class, I just recommend that you get started with whatever watercolors you already have in your kit. I'll be talking about some specific pigments, and this class will be available later as a recording. So if you don't have every pigment that I talk about, it's okay. I'll be giving you some ideas for substitutions, and if you want to try it again with the exact pigments I used, you can always look at the recording. So as some of you might have seen from the email, I do these free classes I do it a few times a year, and part of the reason for this is just to share the botanical painting love with a really enthusiastic group of people that are joining from all over the world. I mean, I've just seen all different parts of the United States, somebody from Sweden, other people from Berlin, Ireland, England, Finland, New York, Canada. So yeah, very international group. The second reason, so that's a lot of fun always, but the second reason is because it is also a kind of preview and an invitation for you to join my other courses, which are not free, since as much as I love to do this, yeah, I also need to make it sustainable. So I will talk a little bit more about that at the very end, but just to put it out there, next week at the exact same time as this starts my fall Botanical Watercolor Workshop. And that is a live streaming course where you also get individual feedback on all of your work. We do a different specimen every week, and I will also be talking about For example, some medicinal properties of the plants that we draw and paint, in addition to the watercolor techniques. And if that doesn't work for you, if the timing doesn't work for you, I also have a video course, which is a lifetime access, and it was a pleasure to make that because the videos are, I would say, a lot higher res than what Zoom enables me to provide you with over live streaming. So we can really get into detail, and I cover all of the basics of watercolor, botanical watercolor, including a lot of color theory, in case that's of interest to you. So without further ado, I hope that gave you a chance to all get the reference photo and the drawing in front of you. And I'll just, since people are joining still, I'll just put that link one more time into the chat. So if you are looking at the reference image now, what you're going to see is an image that has foreshortening. So I'm just going to switch over here to my desk view. Okay. So the reason that I'm not going to be doing my entire drawing live during the class, first of all, there's just like a lot of detail, and while I'm going to provide some time for the drawing, while I'm also explaining things, it takes me longer. It's just more practical to have it done in advance. But the other reason is because the drawing that I like to have as preparation for a watercolor, it's very light. So I use an H or HB pencil. I do add quite a few details, but I like to keep the pencil lines as light as possible, so that they don't compete with the watercolor. So it would be a little disappointing to watch me do the drawing because it's barely visible on the camera. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some sketches here for you to see, much darker than what I would do on the watercolor paper, but just to give you an idea of how to deal with the foreshortening. So let me get my image. So what foreshortening means is that certain shapes, when you're looking at them straight on, they appear shorter than they actually are. So what I would do is I would start with the center of this flower, and then to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, so the flower itself, it's kind of in a shape like this kind of saucer shape. So that's because you're seeing the petals on the sides, you're seeing them from the side. And the top and the bottom, you're seeing them kind of straight on. So these petals in the very front, they are much, much shorter than they physically actually are. So if you see, this is about like half the length. In fact, in the photo, I think it's even less than half. So, you know, the foreshortening is even more extreme than what I've drawn it here. It's always like a little bit hard to convince yourself, right? But there is a little bit of kind of space in here. So and then you can see how the edges of the petals, they're kind of lining up with this elliptical shape. So again, here it's closer in towards the center. So where we have the shorter petals, and then as soon as we get further to the side, we get these longer petals again. So another tip that I can give you is that when you have overlapping shapes, it's really helpful to, what I do usually is I just make this line super light to draw the overlapping shape so that this petal, to make sure that it actually connects to the flower center in a logical way, you can kind of try to measure it and think it through, but the much easier way to do it is to actually start drawing from where the petal would physically connect. Just draw really lightly on the part that overlaps. And then just continue on so that you know it's going to be seamless. And then, you know, you can always just erase the extra line later on. And then, so, I mean, the center of my ellipse is about here. And these petals on the top, I can see that they're longer than these. So that's also, you know, kind of connecting. You can also draw the petals. You can, if it's easier for you, you can draw just the general shape, and then you can add in the edge afterwards. It's just a bit more lines you have to erase at the end, but that can also make things easier. Here we have this little shape where the petal kind of folds over itself. So that would be drawn like this. And then in the center, you know, we have quite a lot of small shapes within this round central shape. So that's because this flower, it's actually part of the daisy family. And that means it's a compound flower. So all these smaller shapes on the center that you see as kind of defined by these red dots, these are actually all individual flowers with their own stamen and pistil. And the petals that you see, these are actually sepals, which are like, through evolution, they're actually modified leaf shapes. So the real flowers are actually all in the central area here. And yes, so Sandy, that's the reason why I'm not doing my final drawing as a live, because this is how light the actual drawing, that's the prep for my watercolor is. It's extremely light. So and so one more tip, and then I'm gonna be just adding the finishing details to my drawing that I'm gonna use for the demo. Even though it might seem like a lot of detail to get into on a drawing, yeah, so I am gonna add just the tips of some of these shapes in the center to kind of, and again, I mean, I did this very lightly on my real drawing, just to focus for a second. There you go. But just adding the tips of those shapes and trying to pay attention to the perspective, like how they get smaller and closer together towards the center, and then further apart at the edges. And what I would also do is add very lightly, but I'll do it darker so you can see, a few of the more visible creases in the petals, because these are actually, it's not just a kind of like extra detail. These lines, they actually help to show the like perspective and direction of the petals. So it can be like a actually pretty useful drawing element. Like for example, in these foreshortened petals, like showing where they lead. So I will let you work on your drawing for a little longer, and I'm also going to work on mine. That's just, yeah, very light and a bit hard to see, but I'm going to add a few more details to it. There's a kind of area over here with a lot of overlapping shapes that I didn't quite get to finish. Fixing a few areas I'm not totally happy with. It does make your life easier with the painting, just to try to get your drawing as accurate as you can, even though it's not that unusual to notice more details actually as you're painting. Okay, so I am still here. Just concentrating a little bit for a minute there. So I am going to let you work on your drawings a little bit longer, but I'm going to switch gears in a minute here. Yeah, Crystal, that's the exact reason that I gave this drawing demo, because otherwise, I don't know if you joined late, but I explained it at the beginning that this is the only way I can really demo the drawing is in the sketchbook, because the watercolor drawing, you cannot see it on the camera. That is, you are exactly right. It is impossible to see. So that's just... I'm sorry, that's the way that it is. That's why I did the other demo.
I was hoping you'd continue using the dark line demo for your watercolor.
No, because that would ruin the watercolor, sorry. So I'm gonna switch gears here to a little bit of color theory while I let you continue to work on your drawings. I'm just gonna explain in advance some of the colors that I'm using and the kind of the way to understand them in order to help you to know, like if you don't have the same pigments that I'm using, so that you know what to use from what you have. So basically, these are the pigments that I am using, and like vermilion, quinacridone, magenta, if you don't have those exact colors, it's okay. What you need to know is that vermilion is a warm red. And I'm probably going to use these terms interchangeably because, like, chances are you might not have vermilion, you might have cadmium red, or you might have, I don't know, any number of other reds from different brands. Quinacridone magenta is my cold red. So what this means, warm red is more orange, cold red is more purple. So it is really helpful for this flower if you have a warm and a cold red, but it doesn't have to be the exact same one as me. So you can take a minute, maybe you never noticed it before, just look at the paints you have, and you can test them out. If you have more than one red, probably one of them is gonna look more purple and one of them is gonna look more orange, and then you'll know which is your warm red and which is your cold red.
Yeah, I have a question. Would you, in your drawing part, would you use those colored pencils that kind of blend in with water?
I don't use that material. I don't use those pencils, so I can't really speak to that technique. It's not really part of my repertoire.
Okay,
I
thank
just
you.
use a regular pencil, an H or HB.
If they're watercolor pencils, they will blend in.
When it comes to a warm blue and a cold blue, this is much more confusing, in my opinion. I mean, I would just think blue is cold, and that's kind of it. But what I have since learned, a blue that goes in the direction of purple is a warm blue. A blue that goes in the direction of green is a cold blue. I can even just... I personally find this kind of counterintuitive. It makes a little bit more sense if you're looking at a color wheel, but in practice, it's sort of, you'll see kind of why it makes some sense. But in this case, I mostly am using the cobalt blue, not actually really because it's a warm blue, but more just because I think the cobalt blue is like a gentler blue for mixing into other colors, because this is not a blue flower, so I don't need like a really strong blue. It's just more for the mixing. And I just like using cobalt blue for that. The phthalo blue, I only am going to use it to get the darkest darks that we might need, just as an accent, or for some parts of the center of the flower. That's the only time I'm going to use the phthalo blue. And phthalo blue is a synthetic pigment that's very intense, and you can mix colors like close to black using the phthalo blue. So if you just need that extra punch of contrast, you just can't get that with the cobalt blue, and that's when I'm going to switch to the phthalo blue. And this phthalo blue, I think a lot of brands have their own terminology for it. Even if you look up the pigment that's actually used, it's phthalo blue, but I think there's like Winsor Newton, they call it Windsor blue, and they actually have a warm version and a cool version. If you have like a Prussian blue, that's not exactly the same as a phthalo blue, but it can be used for the same purpose. The brand of paint that I'm using is a German brand called Schminke, but that doesn't necessarily need to be the case for you. But I do recommend for botanical watercolor and the techniques we're using to use artist grade watercolors and not the student grade watercolors, because it just gives you very different results. And with watercolor, like, you don't need so many different materials or so many different paints, but the ones that the type you choose, it makes a very big difference in the result. So with that, I hope this very brief overview of the pigments is helpful. I'm going to talk about the colors I'm using all throughout the class, but I hope you can apply that to the paints that you have. But if you have questions that come up, feel free to ask. Just to go over my setup here. So obviously got my paper, and I'm using a mix between tubes and pans of watercolors. But if you're buying a set of watercolors to use for botanical paintings, I think the pans are the most ideal for that, because you don't usually need large quantities of color. That's what the tubes are better for. And then I just have a separate palette. This is just something that I like to have handy for just extra space for mixing colors. And I usually keep a ready supply of my 3 primaries on here, which is why I also sometimes have the tubes. So that's just a habit I've gotten into.
May I ask what yellow it is? Is it cat or is it?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't talk about the yellow. This is like the yellow, it's from Schminke and it's called Pure Yellow. I think it's a bit on the cold side, but apparently it's supposed to be like a neutral yellow. The important thing is that you choose a yellow that is transparent,
So
because
it hands a yellow light then in Dan Smith.
I'm trying
They
to
have light, medium, and dark, or is it cad yellow?
yeah, maybe use the light or maybe the medium version, like for this specific flower, because the yellow is quite rich actually. I wouldn't use the cadmium just because it's such an opaque color. And if you have all three of those yellows, you could have fun at the end of the painting, because there is actual yellow color in this flower. You could have a bit of fun with accent colors, trying to match some of the different yellows. But I'm just going to be mixing the colors. So I am using most of the time a round sable brush that is a size, oh, the size has rubbed off, but I think it's a size 6. It's just like a medium round sable brush. It is important that it's sable. And then we'll see how it goes, but I'll occasionally towards the end use a smaller brush for details. I'm using 300-gram hot press watercolor paper, which is smooth, and 300 grams because that allows for layering. If you have a less heavy watercolor paper, it's not necessarily better or worse, but it just isn't quite as good for layering. So you could run into trouble there. Yeah, sable is just, it's actually from kind of like a weasel-like animal, unfortunately. But that's like the hairs that the brush is made out of. And then what's really important that you might not have thought of is having a paper towel on hand. So the paper towel for me is very much a tool that I use while I'm painting, and I will talk about that. And then I have a place for testing out the colors, just a back of an old painting or a piece of scrap paper is fine. And then of course I have a jar of water. And yeah, so with that, I'm pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to be showing you a technique where the colors kind of get mixed and blended through the process of layering. So I'm going to start out. So every layer needs to be transparent in order for that to happen. So in order to make the paint transparent, you need to be adding the right amount of water to your paint mixture. So definitely don't try to paint directly from the pans, because then you can't really control the proportion of water to pigment. So you want to make a very watery consistency. I'm gonna start with the yellow, and I haven't mixed anything in here other than water at this point. But what I'm going to do that might not be as obvious is I'm going to paint quite far beyond where you see yellow on the petal, and I'm going to continue all the way into the petal to where, like, basically the whole part of the red that's also orange. So about 1/3 or halfway down the petal. So what's going to happen is that when we paint the red over the top of this, it's not only going to automatically blend things, but it's also going to mix. Even if the layers are dry, the layers will mix together and create the orange color. So again, I'm purposefully not only painting the areas that appear yellow. I'm right now with a very watery mixture. I'm painting the parts that are yellow all the way down to the parts that are orange, but not to the very bottom where the red actually starts to turn a bit purple. That part we will leave for now. And so one thing, if you have just mixed a lot of water into your paint and mixed it together, at that point, your brush is going to be like, say, I just went into my water cup, I added more water in here, I mixed it around. At this point, my brush is completely loaded up with water. And then if I go directly to my painting, I'm going to have an excess of water on my brush. So that's where the paper towel comes in really handy. So once I've gotten the mixture that I want, I can dry off my brush. Kind of taking care to form a little point as I do that. And then just dipping the tip of my brush into my paint mixture. That way I can control the amount of paint and water mixture that is on my brush. And this is really, really key for paintings where you have, like you're painting small areas or you have a lot of detail. So those two things are pretty much always the case with botanical painting. You don't have as much control if your brush is loaded up fully with water. You want to have just enough for the area that you're painting. If you find that you're running out of paint when you're halfway through a shape, obviously you don't then have enough. And you can, dip your brush a little bit further into your mixture, or it could mean like you've just run out of paint and you need to mix up some more. It's pretty helpful to mix enough paint in the beginning for whatever you're working for, but if it's new to you, of course it can take some time to be able to judge that. So there's one other thing that I need to point out to you, which is that where the yellow stops, this will focus in a second. There we go. So where the yellow stops, I've intentionally left this edge like jagged. So it's not just a straight across edge where it stops. It's kind of like got these brush marks, it's uneven. And the reason for that is because it's going to help it blend into the red when I layer. And these jagged edges, like especially you see the pattern that it's making here, that's going to, like, even if it doesn't blend in completely and you can still see that edge a little bit, it's going to then become part of the texture of the flower petal, like all these creases. So like with watercolor painting, you really often have to think several steps ahead of what you're actually doing. This obviously takes practice, because if you don't know what to expect, there's no way to plan ahead. But this is something to just pay attention to, and you will get the hang of it. So now that I've blocked in all those yellow areas, I am just gonna go back and add, because some areas got a little too much water in them for what I want, or maybe a little too transparent. And I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow just as a second layer, some places where it's dried, to some of the tips, because yellow is just, it's nice to do it first because it's such a light color. Once you have other pigments on the painting, and if the yellow is touching those, it can kind of bleed into the yellow, and it's such a light color that you notice it. So just to get it like a strong yellow color, it's just going to be a little bit easier for me if I add a little more yellow before I add the red, just to help it stand out. So this second application of yellow, I'm not bringing it down as far. I'm only now adding this to the areas that have the strongest yellow color that's visible. So just to the very tips. And yeah, just anywhere else I think needs a little more yellow, I'll just add it now. I think this is kind of looking okay for now, though. Okay, so now if you look at where the petals attach, there is sort of like this purplish, this hint of a purplish red. So I am going to go for this color now, but very, very light. So I'm using a combination of the magenta, my cold red, and the cobalt blue. And with purple, you really have to be careful because it can get dark really quickly. So I can just test it up here in the corner so it's easier for you to see. I want this to make sure this is really transparent. And I'm not going to do as watery of an application. I'm going to actually really dry off my brush this time. And I'm going to add this kind of in these darker areas. I'm starting to now block in these creases already, but I'm doing it in a loose enough way. It's actually also going to become part of the coloration, but I'm going to build this up through these just kind of loose brush, gestural brush strokes. So I'll hold it up so you can kind of see. And I'm also bringing this all the way up where there are creases or shadows, I'm bringing this all the way up through the orange part of the petal, which isn't orange yet, but will be. And this doesn't need to be like perfect, these lines. It can be a bit loose because, like I said, some of these lines are going to stay as detail and some of it is just going to blend into the color to make this more like purplish red that you see.
Which color are we using for this?
This is the cold red mixed with the cobalt blue. So in my case, it's the magenta.
Okay, thank you.
So anywhere that there are creases, anywhere that there are shadows, I'm just adding in pretty liberally because it's so light. This very, very transparent purple. Since this whole part of this petal is kind of in shadow, I might just fill in this whole area here with purple. So what I like about painting using layering and also teaching in this way is that like you don't need to get everything perfect on the first go around. Notice the kind of line that's missing. Because you're building things up through layers, as long as the layers are transparent, it is actually quite forgiving. And it also allows you to build up like quite a lot of complexity and detail without having to be too painstaking about it.
So if something went on a little bit too dark, do you just wait for it to dry and then try to take some of that color out?
That can be difficult to reverse. It depends how dark it is. So it might be that as you proceed with the other layers, you're able to just blend it in. So I would say probably just leave it for now. But that's really something, I know I just said you don't have to be too painstaking, but that's just one thing that you do have to be really careful about is getting too dark in the beginning, because since we're working with transparency, once you lose the transparency, you can't really get it back. But if you haven't gone too dark, then it might just balance out with the rest of the layering, like once you add the red. So cross fingers. Sorry, since I can't see your painting, I don't know if like how dark you did it. So hopefully you can still salvage it.
It seems all the petals worked out except for one has a dark side, but yeah, working on it.
Yes, somebody mentioned a technique in the comments. You can try that, but if it's among the first layers, I would just wait and see how it turns out. I think at this point.
Yeah, I think somebody will still want to buy my painting. I think
I
with
think
one dark petal.
I think at this point, since we haven't even added the red yet, yeah, probably could be okay. Okay, so before I get too far along, I want to add in, because I know this is going to take some time to dry, I want to add in some of the darks in the center of the flower. So for that, I'm using a mixture with the phthalo blue. So remember, the phthalo blue is the greener one. And it's very dark. Like if you just look at it, if you have it in a pan, you can see it looks almost black. So I'm using that in combination with the magenta to create a very dark purple. And I'm just like very loosely, I'm just using the tip of my brush and I'm using a kind of dabbing motion to emulate this texture of the composite flower, the center of this flower. I'll hold this up in a second so you can see what I mean. So I basically took the tip of the brush and I just kind of dabbed, like almost like stippling down here. And I just want to let that dry so that I have this kind of very dark base here. Drop a little bit more down onto the bottom there. And yeah, as Vicky says, like you can see here, right, almost instantly how much lighter the watercolor dries. That is true. Okay, so red, when it comes to the red, one of the reasons why I have a warm red and a cool red is because there isn't actually a single pigment that gives you like a pure red. So I am mixing together in different quantities, depending on if I want a warmer red or a cooler red or something in between. I'm mixing these two, the cold red and the warm red together to get the red hue that I want. I can just show you here. This is a mixture of the two reds. This is probably a little too dark though. So I'm gonna add some more water and maybe increase the proportion of the vermilion, the warm red, but definitely more water. That looks a little better. And very catch-up like.
If you would want to do a background color, would you do that first?
You mean
Like
behind?
Like light blue? Uh-huh. Yeah, like light blue all around.
Oh, you. I mean, I'm not gonna add a background color because typically with the botanical style, you have a white background.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just like one of the stylistic standards.
Okay.
But you can add a background if you want to. And yeah, you can add it probably not at the very end because the colors, when you see them next to each other, it affects the way that you see them because colors are relative. But yeah, at any point during the painting, you could add some background. So now I'm gonna make sure again that I don't have too much paint on my brush. And yay, now we finally get to add some red. It's very transparent. And I want the edges of where I'm painting the red to kind of mimic the shape that I see in the petal. So again, like using the brush strokes to get this kind of jagged edge. And I'm gonna leave for now some room for some highlights, or wouldn't necessarily call them highlights actually, but the lightest parts of the petal, I'm gonna leave a little bit of white there still for that. We could definitely do more to blend this edge where the red meets the yellow. But I'm not gonna worry about that yet. So again, I'm leaving some little bits of white poking through still. I'm not doing like a solid flat wash, if you're familiar with that terminology here, because like I really do want to get this wrinkly texture. So I'm using the brush strokes in the direction of like kind of following where those creases would be, not in a super precise way, but just kind of following the contours of the petal. Well, thank you, Vicky, for helping to answer some of these questions that are coming into the chat. That's very kind of you. Yeah, so the that just goes back to the difference between the warm red and the cool red. So the cool red is the one that's going to look pinker, and the warm red is going to be the one that looks more orange. But of course, if you have a cool red and you just want to make it warmer, you can just add yellow or orange to it as well if you don't have a warm red, or you just want to do it in a different way. Because with mixing colors, I mean, the important thing is that you get the color that you want. The important thing is not really what exact colors you use to get there. So there are different ways of mixing the same color. And of course, like what we are doing now, we are mixing the colors on the paper actually through the layering process. Because as you can start to see, so where the red overlaps with the yellow, this is automatically looking more orange, which is what we want because the petals do kind of fade from a purpley red to a red to a more orange red. And yeah, I kind of think this is like a little shortcut because it saves a little time instead of having to mix, like stop in the middle of painting the petal and switch to a different color. You can just layer over the yellow. But yeah, as we'll see, it's probably also going to need some adjusting. So there's always this back and forth, of course, as well. With layering, it really does take some patience to like build up the color and the contrast to where you want it to finally be. Yeah, watercolor does require a lot of patience. But, you know, one of the things that I think is quite lovely about making botanical paintings is that it is really this like slowing down and observing. I think because there's really no way to make it go faster. You're kind of forced to slow down and spend this time with your specimen and really spend time observing nature, which can be like, regardless of the result, can be a really beautiful process in and of itself. It's like when you're painting a plant, you're really forming a relationship with that specimen. And so, yeah, it's like, it takes time and patience, but I think it's like a valid investment of your time. Because even if the painting isn't perfect in the end, you still maybe can reap some other rewards just from the process itself. So I am dipping in here. I've got like on this side, I've got my red that I've added a lot of water to and is more on the warm side. And then down here, I've got a more concentrated version that has more magenta. So I'm going to use that now to work on some of the darkest parts of the petals. I know that we already did this a little bit with the purple, but now I'm going to go in a little bolder. Oh, that's maybe a little too much. Add a little more water than that. So yeah, I mean, if you go too dark and you don't like it, if it's still wet, you can use a paper towel to soak it up. But I'm just gonna paint over it.
In botanical painting, is it always wet on dry?
Yeah, that's typically the way that, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions because different artists have their unique styles, but typically when you're working with like really detailed specimens, that's just the way. It's typically a pretty dry technique. Because this gives you the most control. Especially when getting into like these narrow shapes. So you can see how like I'm really building up the color gradually. I'm not just going directly for the bright red. Because if you really look at it, like the red, it's not just a solid block of color. No, I am not going to erase the pencil marks, which is why I wanted to have them to be quite light in the beginning. And whatever you can see at the end is just the way that it's going to be. It's if I try to erase the pencil marks like after I've already painted that area, it can actually disturb the painting. And I don't personally mind it. I mean, I just see it as if that was part of the process, then that was part of the process. Then it's part of the painting now. And I mean, I don't feel like I need to hide that there was a drawing there. It's also quite typical if you look at botanical paintings to see some line work. If you're looking at reproductions, which are often lithographs, then the line work is very apparent because that's just a totally different process. But the point just being it's not abnormal to see line work. These are really great questions, that really thoughtful questions today. I appreciate it because, I need to keep talking because so that you know that your computer screen isn't frozen. But sometimes I'm like, oh, what else is there to say? Yeah, Tammy, I'm just looking at yours. Yeah, so you probably need to make sure that the layers are completely dry before you go back on top of a given layer. I would assume that's the issue. If that doesn't help, feel free to chime in again. Okay, I'm gonna work a bit now on the center of the flower because I don't want to get too far with everything else and have this white spot in the middle. So let's see. I'm gonna go in with this darker red again. And I'm just gonna go, again, just trying, oh, this should be a bit more orange. I'm gonna actually, I will add some yellow. Sorry, my mixing is off screen, but it's kind of hard to fit everything. But I basically just mixed in some orange, some yellow to the red. And I'm just gonna try to go for the tips of the composite flower in the center here. And again, I'm just using these short, like stabbing brush strokes, trying to emulate the texture that I'm seeing with the actual brush strokes themselves. So, okay, I didn't do too much here, but I'm gonna let this dry. A little bit more. I'm gonna let this dry before I add the yellow. So what we could do now is add some green. So actually what I said is kind of an offhand remark earlier that colors are relative. It is the case that, so I don't want to wait too long, especially these bits of green that are next to the flower itself. It is going to make the yellow pop out in a different way once I add the green. So I don't want to put that off until the very end. I'm just using a green mixture that I actually already had, but you can basically, you can start, if you have a green on your palette, you can start with that, and then you can adjust it using the yellow and I would recommend the phthalo blue for the mixing of a green. Again, remember the phthalo blue is the cold blue. That's the one that already goes in the direction of green. And then you can always add a little bit of red to it if your green is too bright. So I can just show you that. So I'll take a little bit here of my, oh yeah, here, down here you can see it. Take a bit of my phthalo blue. Add some yellow. And the green on these sepals is actually quite dull, like going kind of a brownish green. So I'm going to add a little bit of red to the green to dull it. And I think that's pretty close. So having this green here is really now helping this yellow to pop out. On the stem, I'm going to actually make a bluer version, just adding a little more phthalo blue to this green. And I'm going to just start out by doing the shadow of even a little bluer. So the right hand side of the stem is really in shadow. So that's really an exercise in brush control, isn't it? But do my best to leave one edge of the stem, leaving this white edge here. And also go back over this and kind of just darken up the center of the shadow a little more. I can also use this on the edges of some of these little leaflets. And now I will just go over, I'm taking a slightly yellower version of the green now, so that I have a little contrast. And I will go over the whole stem, including the part that I put into the shadow earlier. Oops, and it looks like I didn't let it dry long enough, which is just removed a bit of paint from one area in a way that I didn't want. So, okay, I have to let that dry completely before I go back over it again. I can still fix that. But yeah, that's what happens if you don't wait. But now that this is dry, I can add the yellow in there. I'm gonna take this yellow and just add like a little bit of red to it to just make it a little bit more orange. Because that's not a really that's not a very pure yellow in there. And then in order not to have it completely just mix into the red, again, I'm just using this dabbing motion that I used before. I'm not like doing a flat wash over the whole thing, because that would then, I used pretty highly concentrated color here in the center that would just blend the whole thing together. I'm just dabbing the paint on with the tip, like just sort of stabbing the paper with the tip of the brush. Okay, so now that I have this yellow, I'm gonna go back again now into the yellow, I guess now for like the third time, but I'm gonna now again add some overlap. And you're gonna start to see it really blend now. There are a lot of other techniques for blending, but I am attempting in this demo to only blend through the layering. There are a lot of other ways you can soften those edges as you go with water or with sort of scrubbing with the tip of a brush. There are a lot of other ways to do that, but in order to just hopefully focus on one technique so that you kind of come away from this class feeling like you at least learned one solid concept, I'm trying to do the blending like only in this one way. So for those of you that are more experienced and you are thinking like, I would have done this differently, or I would have blended the edges more like as I go with a graded wash. Yes, of course you could do this, but I just, for today, I wanted to do that this way, this one way, and really stick to this one technique and see it through to the end. And I think that if the layers are transparent enough, I think it is gonna work. And of course, like you have to really make sure that you leave a lot of overlap between the layers. So of course, like if you paint the yellow and then here you mix an orange and you paint orange, and then here you mix a red and you paint red, you will have the right colors, true, without the layering, but they are not going to blend together in the same way. Like it would be a different effect. So you have to really make sure that you have enough overlap here. And again, like really also make sure that your brush strokes are moving in the direction of the contours of the petals, because it's just going to also contribute to the texture, to the blending, to the overall naturalistic effect. And let's see what happened here. I kind of forgot about these. This is going to be need to push back into a little more shadow. So I think we're going to need another going through with the purple again. This light purple that we used before as kind of a accent color and a shadow color. I'm going back to that. So you can kind of see how I do a pass with one color, I let it dry, I do a pass of something else, but then I often return to that, right? It's like, it isn't just done. It's kind of then readjusting some more. And that's kind of how this also blending effect happens. It's like you could say, oh, why so many layers? But doing it in that way, it does accomplish something with the blending. And if you wanted to do the blending in a different way, like say, more using water, or this also, you know, takes time and effort. So it's not necessarily, yeah, you can do it a different way, but it's not necessarily faster anyway. So this area here that I kind of forgot a little bit about. This needs to be like looking that it's more like it's behind this other petal in the shadow. So I actually just did a full-on layer of purple over the yellow, which just turns it into a kind of a gray, which, I mean, we know that's a yellow petal, it's not gray, but it pushes it back, so it gives the illusion that it's going behind the other petal, which is what we want. And let's see, I'm running out of purple. Just take some from here. It's the same color. And I feel like I can use some more purple in the center. This is just for the darker parts. And you have what I guess are like these pistils sticking out of the individual flowers in some cases. Purple lines. And I mean, now would be the time I could switch to a smaller brush if I wanted to really now getting into the detail adjustment phase, adding smaller details, adjusting for contrast in some places maybe. I'm like emphasizing now some of the creases in the petal, but whereas before I was just thinking of it more as overall texture, now I'm really more paying attention to adding like the precise lines that I see. So I could switch, for example, now to a smaller brush. I'll do that to show you. So I can add really some fine lines here. And you can see how that kind of works really well with what's underneath already. Just don't want to overdo it, but. This line got a little too dark, so I'm just gonna blot it out with some water. So like at this point, I might use a little water to blot out something that I don't like, but in those early stages, with all this layering, chances are it's probably just gonna get worked in. maybe now that I added a bit more purple, I'm just seeing some areas where I want more red. It does kind of go back and forth. But I'm happy with the way that the red doesn't just look solid. It's sort of has this lightness that a petal should. And like, if you paint right in the beginning, this whole shape, a very bright red, even though that is the color of the petal, it's going to give it a very like solid and heavy appearance. It's not going to have this kind of light papery quality that a petal ought to have. So that's one of the reasons too why we leave like little bits of white showing through the color, or like a lot of texture to kind of give this lightness. And you can still give the feeling of bright color by adding the color in more selectively. You don't have to have the bright color be everywhere to give to have the brightness. I think I'm almost done here, actually. Just going back in with a very watery kind of orange, and I'm just using it to blend some of the details that I just added. And yeah, places where I can see like, yeah, I do want a little more opaque color there. The thing is, you can always make your painting more opaque. But you cannot at the end make it more light because you're relying on the white of the paper. That is like the very unique thing about watercolor painting. That's sort of what gives it its uniqueness and its beauty, and it's also kind of the main challenge and limitation that you have to work on. Whereas with opaque painting, you can always just add some white with watercolor. You are relying on the white of the paper.
In the foreshortening of the center lower, should be lighter than the rest of the petals. Is that what you do?
You just cut out whoever was just talking.
So what was the question again?
In the
Whoever was
foreshortening
asking,
of the center part should be lighter than the rest of the petals when you do foreshortening at the center part, center lower petals. Or does it
here,
make a difference? Yes. Should it be a little lighter than the back part, or is it the same thing? Does it matter?
well, it's lighter than the petals that are directly behind it, because the ones that are these two petals that are directly behind it are, it's casting a little bit of a shadow there. So does that answer your question?
I just wasn't sure when you're doing these, when you always have to worry about the lighting or to make one part lighter than the other. But in your case, as long as you have the petals in the back darker, it'll stand out then. Is that right? Because it's real nice the way you have it done, because you really see
Yeah.
the
So
shortening.
like, yeah, so here this part where it overlaps, and then this part where it's overlapped, I've gone a bit darker, and then this comes forward. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting just seeing it on the screen, like, because I can also see your view. It's like from far away, it looks so detailed, but then I'm almost surprised myself when I hold it up and I see like all the brush strokes and all the texture. So that's just that's an interesting, even like if you see a painting that has a lot of detail, that's especially if you're just seeing it online or in reproduction, it could be actually a lot looser in the construction than you might imagine. This is oftentimes the case. How are other people's paintings going?
For mine, it looks like, in comparing to yours, that you have a lot more crispy lines, and mine are fuzzy all over. And maybe I didn't wait for it to dry before the next layer. Like my middle is kind of coming, but the worst is the little petals that are under that little clump, you know what I mean? So I think I would do that differently next time, myself.
Yeah,
'Cause
for me, I think that the lines or brush marks that appear more crisp are only the ones that I did like at the very, very end. So you can still add, you just might have to go a little bit darker, maybe even than you want to, but to get that contrast.
Let's see if I can.
Also for those accents,
See how that is? It looks really fuzzy.
Oh yeah, well I can only see it really tiny on yours, but yeah, that looks like it maybe didn't, it just wasn't dry, actually.
Yeah.
The first thing you said.
I did two of them, and this is my first one that I did the blue background.
Oh wow.
I did a
Cool.
different flower.
So one thing, when you get to the point where you want to add accent color, and you need to use the most concentrated version of a color, what's actually really convenient about this palette design, and but other palettes you can use this way too, like these areas, when after you've mixed a color and you've been using it for a while, and then some areas start to dry, you can just go in with a damp brush and pick up just a little bit of paint that you might need from the area that's actually just the dried pigment. And this is going to give you like a very intense version of that color. that you can use for like fine details or like contrast.
Yeah, thank you.
Because the water evaporates from the paint, so it's actually, if you mix enough of a color, you can use it again later in its more concentrated form. Kind of works with the actually the process of the painting. Just gonna darken up some of the green parts. Actually using a bit of this dark purple that I mixed earlier for some of the darkest parts of the stem and the leaves. It does get quite dark down there. Darker than I realized at first.
I want to ask a question about your sable brushes. I don't have a sable. So what particular brand of sable would you suggest that you've used that gives you the result you have for the botanical flowers?
I am not super picky about the exact brand. It's just the material itself. So just making sure that it's like real sable and not synthetic sable. For example, there are also synthetic sable brushes, but they're just not as good. What I like about them is that they hold a lot of water. Like if you look at the shape of the brush, or actually, I mean, this is small, so it's maybe hard to see, but in this part, it holds a lot of water, but then it still comes to a very fine tip.
Thank you.
Could you tell me what size brush that is?
That's a 6.
Thank you.
So I would love to see some of you in my class that starts on Tuesday. And just as a little added incentive, everybody who participated in this class is going to receive a little coupon in their inbox at the end of this class, so that if you want to join me and you're not quite sure, hopefully that will push you over the edge. The first class, we are going to be painting St. John's wort, which is it's a small, beautiful flower that is also just grows as a hedgerow plant here in Germany. But it's also one of the most important medicinal plants with a very long history. Some of you may have seen it in a pharmacy, like maybe as a pill form, but we're going to look at the actual flower, and I'll talk about some of its uses, even a little bit of mythology associated with that plant, and then of course the detailed painting technique. And yeah, for those of you that are completely new to botanical watercolor, I can highly recommend my video course, because there is where I made it as kind of like a textbook for my ongoing live courses, because it was an opportunity to really break down every technique, the reason behind it, how you get to that point, like mixing colors, like just how to mix green. I mean, you can spend a whole lesson just on thinking about how to mix different greens, because like some of you might know that the human eye can see more shades of green than any other color. So learning how to mix all these different greens that we need for botanical painting, just being able to go into that kind of level of detail. So, and you're going to get a coupon for that as well. So hopefully some of you would like to try those courses and paint with me again. If not, but you still just want to do something to support these free classes and keep them happening, keep them sustainable, you can also make a donation, even a small donation. It just helps to cover some of the costs on the back end and keep these free classes going. People seem to like them, and I'm really happy to do them. And yeah, so again, the same link that you already have for the reference image. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there is a PayPal donation button. Anything, even like just a few euros or dollars, just helps keep this going. So it's like paying it forward to the next free class. So, okay, that's it for my pitch. I have to do it. It's not, yeah, that's my sales pitch. But I hope that you enjoyed this class. I would love to see some of the paintings that you made. Now it looks like we're pretty much out of time. But if you would like to post something on Instagram or Facebook and tag us, or just email me, I would love to see what you created during this class.